Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we've got some more bits for the Clod. Now usually I tend to go fairly low cost with wheels and tyres where I can. For the most part, the type of driving I do works just as well on a clone set of tyres as the brand names. With the Clod however, there aren't really any clone tyres available. So I've gone and got a set of RC 4-wheel drive B&H Clod tyres. There's a few options for tyres on the Clod. RC 4-wheel drive do a couple, as do Proline and J Concepts. Part of the trouble is finding stock in the UK, which reduces the options a bit. Importing isn't going to be all that great, as with the shipping the price gets pushed way up. All that's really left was the Proline Destroyer, which probably would have been the sensible option in terms of performance, which leaves the RC 4-wheel drive tyres. On balance, looking at the cost and the tread pattern, I ended up with the B&H's, and the best bit is they're available from rcbits.co.uk. Side by side with the stock tyres, you can see they're just slightly bigger. Probably not so good for performance, but I'm not a huge fan of widened clods with tyres that look a bit small. It would no doubt cut down on the weight a bit, but I'm not racing, so looks do play quite a big part. Next then, the wheels. Now the cheap option would be to get a set of Tamiya Clod or bullhead wheels, but they require you to glue the tyres on, which after spending this much I didn't really fancy doing. That means we need some beadlocks. But we have the same problem as the tyres, availability. There's some rather nice aluminium sets that cost a small fortune, so they're out. J Concepts and Proline do some affordable ones, but again, trying to find a set in the UK is quite difficult. Back to RC Bits again, and I found a set of RC 4-wheel drive igniters. The wheels are plastic with aluminium rings and hex adapters. I've also got a set of medium width hex adapters to replace the wide ones that they come with. These are a bit expensive for what they are, but we've come this far, so why not? Just to put all this into perspective, for the wheels and tyres I would usually spend well under 50 quid for a full set of 1.9s or 2.2s. For me, they're always perfectly good enough. A set of Tamiya Clod tyres will set you back 50 quid plus 20 or so for the stock wheels if you shop around. It does make sense since they are quite a lot bigger than the 2.2s. And these RC 4-wheel drive bits from a UK stockist came close to £170 after using a discount code. I think that easily doubles the most I've ever spent on tyres. That's most of the cost of a new kit. Also, just for fun, that comes to $225 US. Ordering from RC 4-wheel drive directly, they come to $150, which is just a little bit cheaper. There is of course shipping and tax to add if you're in the States, but even so, that's quite a difference. However, I've had this Clod, or at least the axles, for 20 odd years, and I hope still to have it in another 20 years, so I think we can splash out a bit. Plus, the difference in grip is going to improve a fast Clod hugely. It'll completely transform the handling, and most importantly, the fun factor. Right, I think it's time we had a look at the wheels. In the box you get a pair of pre-assembled wheels, and that's about it. There's no instructions, not even a little sheet that points out which screws are for appearance and which screws are holding the bits together. But we'll get back to that little issue in a minute. Inside the wheels we've got a plastic hubcap with lots of screws. On the other side there's the aluminium wide hex adapter, which is rather nice. All the screws are actually screws too, none are just moulded in. That means we could swap them out for a stainless set for a bit more bling in the future. The thing is though, there's rather a lot of them, especially around the rings. Helpfully though, not all the screws actually attach the rings to the wheels. Looking at the box, it says alternating threaded hole design. What they mean is every other screw is just a short one that doesn't screw into the plastic. The difficulty is, which is which? There's going to be a little bit of trial and error working out which ones actually need to come out. Quality wise though, they feel immensely solid with no sharp or unfinished bits. Very nice. Next, the reason for the medium hex adapters. If we offer up one of the stock wheels with our custom wideners, we can see roughly how much offset we have. I can just about get my index finger in between the kingpin and the inside of the wheel. If we swap to one of our new wheels, we can see it's quite a lot wider. Not a problem as such, but I'm trying to keep the width as tight as I can. Helpfully, RC 4-wheel drive have a rather excellent diagram showing the medium and narrow adapters, the bottom left being the Clod axle with the medium adapters. Even without using the measurements, it looks like we should be able to get a finger in between the inside of the wheel and the kingpin. To swap the hex adapters, first we need to remove the hubcap. There's 8 M2 screws around the outside, but just like the rings, not all of them actually attach the hubcap to the wheel. It turns out if you have the wheel so the RC 4-wheel drive logo is the right way up, it's the top and the bottom screw that need to come out. The screws that attach to hubcap are a lot longer, so you'll soon know if you start removing the wrong ones. Next, around the centre of the wheel, there's 6 M3 screws that thread into the hex adapter. They all need to come out, which allows the adapter to be removed. If we compare the width of the wide and medium adapters, you can see there's quite a big difference. It's a shame the wheels don't come with the narrow adapters and maybe some plastic spacers. It would have made them a bit more universal, but then I suppose they're going to try and make more money by selling all the accessories. Anyway, if we offer up the medium adapters and screw the screws back in, we can offer the wheel back up to the axle and see what the offset looks like. And there we go, pretty much the same as the old custom wideners, certainly close enough. Next we need to remove the rings, and there's absolutely nothing I can see that suggests which screws attach the rings and which are just for looks. You can, however, feel the difference without taking the screws out all the way. If you get one that's just for looks, it'll be threaded into the aluminium ring, so when you try and undo it, it will go with a crack and there will be very little resistance. The longer screws are threaded into the plastic, so when you undo them they'll feel tight for a good few turns as the plastic grips the threads. Once you find the long ones, you need to go all the way around and remove every other screw. Needless to say, this does take a while, so as always with beadlock builds, it's best done with a supply of tea and a movie. It's not really something you can rush. With the outside ring off, we need to do the same on the inside ring, so the wheel is ready for the tyre. Basically then, now it's ready, we need to stuff the wheel into the tyre and get the bead evenly in the slot around the outside. Sounds simple, but as always, there's a bit more swearing than you might like. The tyres are fairly soft, so they're quite stretchy, which makes the first half easy, but getting the bead over the other side is a bit of a faff. You can use a screwdriver to work the bead over the wheel, just be very careful not to get the tip going into the foam insert and damage it. After a few minutes of pulling and minor swearing, you should have the wheel inside the tyre with the beads in the slots. Now for the fun bit, or the next fun bit, we need to refit the rings. It's critical we get the rings level and the tyre beads go down into the slots evenly. You can quite easily get something pinched, so you have to take care and pay attention. First, we install 4 of the long screws in the top, bottom, left and right of the ring. For now, just far enough that the ring's in contact with the tyre. Flip the wheel over and do the same. This should centre up the tyre and stop the bead from popping out while we install the rest of the screws, which we need to install so they're roughly the same as the first 4, again on both sides. Now we can go up, down, left, right, going across the ring and tighten all the screws up a little bit at a time until the rings are fully seated. The goal is to draw the ring down, keeping it as level as we can so the bead goes into the slot nice and straight. Sometime later we have one wheel ready to go. Now before we go any further, we should offer it up to the axle and just check what the clearance looks like. We'll pop on one of the Tamiya hex adapters, pop the wheel over the top and use a wheel nut to hold it on. Now if we give it a spin and fiddle with the steering, it looks like it's going to work a treat. Super smooth, and I can already feel these are far better balanced than the old abused Tamiya wheels. Looking at it from the top, we can see there's a good few millimeters clearance between the tyre and the lower link, so I think it's just about perfect. So that's one wheel pretty much complete, but there's 3 more to put together. Other than making 2 left and 2 right wheels, all the assemblies are the same. So rather than repeat myself in the video, we'll do a fade to black and come back a little later. Well, it's actually the next day now. It took a couple of hours, but here we have a full set of wheels ready to go. But before we fit the wheels, there's one thing I'm not 100% happy with, and that's the hubcaps. They look pretty good, but there's the classic issue of small screws. If we're outside, especially when it's cold, we don't really want to have to fiddle about with a 1.5mm Allen key to tighten up the wheel nuts, or remove them for that matter. Leaving the caps off is an option of course, but that kind of ruins the look. Instead, I've been at the 3D printer again and printed up a set of caps with a hole in the middle for a nut driver. We've got the same set of holes around the outside for all the short screws, with the other 2 holes being for the long screws with holes in the bottom for the posts. To fit it, it's just a case of swapping over all the screws, then offering the cap up to the wheel, lining it up with the posts and pressing it down. Nip up the 2 long screws and that's it fitted. Not quite as smooth as the stock part, but it'll be much easier to deal with when we're outside. We'll do that 4 more times and that's the wheels complete and ready to fit. The only downside to this setup is the good old Tamiya cross wrench doesn't quite reach far enough to tighten up the nut. It's a shame because these little wrenches are really handy to keep in a pocket. Normal nut drivers can be a bit bulky, but needs must. Let's use a 7mm socket and a screwdriver handle. Well, there we go. That's going to be so much easier. Now, I didn't quite get the tolerances right though. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I sized up on the outside diameter of the socket and completely forgot to add any clearance. It fits, but the socket is fairly tight in the hole. So if you're not gentle taking it out, you can leave the socket behind, which is a bit of a pain. A one-piece nut driver would work, but I'll just adjust the design before uploading it to Thingiverse and print off another set with some actual clearance. I think I'm just going to put it down to trying to do something constructive after an already long day. Don't design when dopey. Right, with all the 4 wheels on, we can power up the transmitter and the truck and double check the clearances between the tyres and the lower links. It should be fine, but it's worth checking before we head out. Well, it's all looking pretty good. There's an even gap on each side and nothing's rubbing. We'll just need to pop the body on and we're done. Quite a straightforward upgrade. I think it's improved the look quite a bit with the super sharp tyre tread, and the white wheels matching the body work pretty well too. I do think we're going to have to swap out the screws for some stainless ones though. But that's all a bit boring. The main thing with new tyres is, do they actually improve the traction? So let's go outside to the usual side of the road spot and have a bash. The first thing I noticed, in a straight line drag, there's barely any wheel spin at all, so we've got a lot more grip. You can still spin up the inside wheel when turning, but it's a massive improvement. The downside to this though is the 13-turn motors are seeing a lot more load, so they're warming up quite nicely. The ESC also feels a little bit warm. Nothing too alarming, but there's definitely a bit more current being thrown around. That, along with the cooler ambient temperature affecting the lipos, it has reduced the runtime quite a bit. We're going to need to fit an adjustable motor mount next, with some smaller pinions to let the motors get up to RPM. With the reduced load, we should also be able to advance the motor timing a few degrees to gain some of the top speed back. It's going to be a balancing act, but we should be able to get a bit more initial oomph off the line. So that's going to be it from me this week. I'll leave the ClodBuster running for a bit so you can hear the motor sounds. But as always, thanks for watching. Like if you liked, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a message if there's something on your mind. Bye guys. Grippy.
Oh, you have to warn me a bit when you're going to do that.
It stopped a bit quicker than I thought.
I went straight past it.
MacLeod, yeah.